Hello, I'm Mr. Baker. This is the 8th unit for my environmental science class. It's on waste. We're talking about trash, we're talking about recycling, we're going to talk about hazardous materials and what those all mean and a little bit more about them as we go. The first unit talks about trash, right? We're going to specifically talk about solid waste and landfills and kind of where things go after they leave your house, right? So, the first thing we need to do is define what we mean by solid waste. So, remember back in physical science or basic 8th grade science when you learned what a solid was, right? Not a liquid, not a gas. A solid is any object that has definite mass and definite shape, right? So, or definite volume at least. And if it is waste, we're going to talk about that as unwanted or discarded material, right? So, it's trash, right? This is a graph showing in millions of tons the things that have been thrown away in the United States from about 1960 to 2014. I know that's a little dated now. It's 8 years as of the time of recording, but just look at the percentages, right? Containers and packaging and non durable goods already take up a large percentage of this whole way back in 2014, before many people that are now using those like deliver to home services, and I hope I'm not dating myself too much here, like Amazon Prime, like Target and Walmart deliveries, right? Like getting your groceries delivered, right? Or Uber Eats, Grubhub, that kind of thing. All those things give you a lot of containers, a lot of packaging. So that percentage has increased as we've gone. Yard trimmings has stayed about the same because we're not giving that much more space to our lawns, right? To landscaping. But everything else has increased. Food waste happens everywhere, not just in the kitchen, right? Any unwanted food that you eat that you throw away, any extra food that you cut off when you're cooking, anything that is grown but not harvested correctly, so it gets thrown away, all the way through. That's food waste, right? Durable goods that wear down over time, so things that you buy that you use for a while and then break and get thrown away, including stuff like cars. That's durable goods. Right? Non-durable goods are one-use type things like water bottles, as well as things that you're going to use for a very short period of time, like paper or like note cards, that kind of thing. Right. So, just to give you some percentages here, this is a little bit more recent, but this is of biodegradable items. All right. So we've got paper taking up a large portion. Right. Think about how much paper you use in your regular day at school. It's a lot. Right. Um, but we're also thinking about things like yard trimmings. We talked about that. Food, plastics, rubber, leather, textiles, all that stuff. Right. Now, biodegradable means that it can be broken down by natural causes, right? So in a regular landfill, paper is going to take a month to deteriorate and break down in the best circumstance, right? If you take a whole ream of paper, like a big stack of paper, in a container and throw it out, it's going to take longer because it's not as much surface area. Foods can take up to 4 months depending on what they are. If it's dairy, a lot of times it doesn't take as long. If it's low in fat, sometimes it doesn't take as long. If it's high in carbohydrates, it doesn't take as long. Yard trimmings, it depends. Again, it depends on what it is. Higher surface area means shorter amount of time, but we're looking at months, not years. Plastics, once you get into plastics, you're looking at 20 plus years to 500 plus. All right, I'm sticking with a 20 to 50 for my class, 20 to 500 for my class to keep it simple. Metal doesn't deteriorate, right? It might rust and change over time and lose some of its mass, but it doesn't break down. Right? Iron, when it deteriorates, it's usually not losing mass to its metal, right? Right. So there are two types of solid waste I want you to know for my class: municipal solid waste and industrial solid waste, and they are what they say on the packaging, right? Municipal is local, household and business, small businesses, not big businesses. Like Amazon isn't producing municipal solid waste most of the time. They're producing industrial solid waste. Industrial solid waste is big stuff, manufacturing and industrial. We're going to have a bunch of examples we'll go over in my own class. I'm sure you can think of some of your own. Like I said, biodegradable means it can be broken down by bacteria or other decomposers like fungi, right? Funguses, mushrooms. We're also starting to, we, not as in me, but as in scientists who are working in the field, are also looking at bioengineering bacteria to specifically break down things. That is a very burgeoning, outgrowing area of concern for some people and hope for others. Right? We've talked about the ethics of bioengineering in my biology class. Some of you might remember that if you took me or if you've read those watched those videos. But a simple step that you can do is sort your waste. Sorting your waste into things that have to go into the trash versus things that can be recycled or even things that can be composted, right? Just that simple step can save a lot of time and a lot of money down the road. Now, depending on where you live, not all those services might be provided to the public. I know here in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm recording this, there are multiple companies that do composting for free. They will take your compost off your hands for free. All you got to do is get it to them. You might pay to have them pick it up. Same with recycling. But recycling is much more common than compost. Right? So where it goes from your trash can is it's usually taken to a landfill or a sanitary landfill. These are just some definitions on the screen in case you don't know where they are. If you need to stop and read them, hit pause on the video. Right. A sanitary landfill looks like this in general. Right. A pit is usually dug out so that it gets down to natural rock foundations. Rock is usually very low permeability, right? So not a lot of things can get through it and seep past it. Then a layer of low permeability clay or even a engineered material can be used to line this pit to further reduce the amount of stuff that could get into the natural environment. Usually a plastic or synthetic membrane is used as well, some type of covering for that clay that makes it liquid tight as well, right, as airtight. So this is being sealed, right? It's creating its own container. Like if you've ever used a Rubbermaid container in your fridge to hold leftovers, right? Same concept here, right? We are sealing it as much as possible. Right, then the waste gets added. A lot of times as the waste gets added, either on a daily basis, a weekly basis, dirt or other infill is added to the waste so that it's not just straight trash throughout the whole thing. Adding the soil here can increase the biome variability, right? Adds those fungi and bacteria that can break down the waste. And another clay cap, sometimes another liner is added to the top of it to seal it off. Now, as that waste gets broken down, it might degrade into liquids, it might degrade into gas. The most common gas that is produced is methane. And so pipes are usually sunk into the waste to extract that gas, to let it come out of the landfill. That gas then can be harvested and sold to another company that might burn it and use it to produce electricity or energy at least. Others might just be burning it off. Right? The local landfill where I live here in Columbus, Ohio, will burn off some of it and sell some of it because their buyers are only buying so much volume of gas. So any extra gas that they produce, they have to do something with. Burning methane is relatively clean and doesn't produce that much toxins because it's just methane, CH4. So carbon and hydrogen get released. A little bit of carbon dioxide is released, but most of it burns off. Right? The other thing is that liquids come out. So we've got something called leachate. If you remember what leachate is from the previous slide, you know that it is a liquid that has seeped through or been produced from the breakdown of that waste, and it needs to be treated. So it's usually drained to a on-site, effectively water treatment plant that's going to make sure that there's no solids in that water. It's going to clean the water. It's going to disinfect the water, and then it might get released into the public utilities. It might just get released into the natural water table that's present in the area, right? But they're not going to let it just sit on the bottom of the waste. They're not going to dump it locally. Usually it's pumped off site. Right? So as of right now, the United States is set to run out of landfill capacity in about 2036. Now we're always opening more landfills. The United States keeps building more landfills and creating more landfills to keep that capacity past our current. We also export it. We pay other countries to take it off our hands. Because remember, if it's not in your land, if it's not inside your territorial boundaries, it's not your problem anymore. So if you pay another country to take care of it, it's now their problem to deal with. The other kind of final destination is incineration. So it's sorted into different types of materials. Like we can't burn off most metals, so those are removed with magnets most of the time. Sometimes it's with manual labor, sometimes it's with very specialized devices. Then it is shredded to increase the surface area, because remember, surface area is king when it comes to things like fire, things like chemical breakdown. The bigger amount of surface area, the faster and easier it happens. Right? And then it is usually pre-dried to make sure that there's less liquids in it, because liquid takes a lot of energy to turn into a vapor, right? And then it's burned. Now, any toxins that are released in that incineration have to be filtered off because of rules that the EPA has put in place here in the United States, and similarly across other countries as well. The EPA didn't do it, but they have their own departments that take care of that, or they're part of the EU that has done that as well. Those filters are now lower mass than the original trash, but they are more toxic. So the filters have to be taken care of, usually with special procedures, like what we'll talk about it later in this unit with hazardous materials. Right? So some of those problems that we're going to associate with that are going to be expanded in class. A lot of people don't want to live next to landfills, right? So that's a problem. Not every landfill is what's called a sanitary landfill, so those cause problems as well. Like I said, this is not an inclusive lesson. It's just to get us started, to give you some space to think about it, and for you to hear me explain things again if you needed it. Have a good one.